Okay, sorry about that interruption there. So, scaffolds. Here's my personal GitHub account rather than ACSII, which is where we're storing the sort of lectures version, if you like. I'm gonna just get you back into Git. So here's my local dev directory, and I will go git clone and then paste in my URL. So I've got Git set up with an SSH key locally. You should have that as well. If you can't remember how to do it, please post on the wiki for this week and ask me to do a recap of how to set up SSH keys. I'll happily do that if you need a refresher on that. So because I've used the Git URL, this one, then this is checked out and checked in using my Git key. If I use HTTP, I'll be prompted for username and password, and obviously a Git read-only URL is a read-only copy. I've checked out my project, and I cd into eRegister when it's checked out, and there's the root of my Grails application. I'm going to run gedit and application properties in the background so that I've got an edit window, and I'll just move that to the workspace right. And again, everything's set up. I've got view side panel. For the side panel, I've got it set to the file system with my eRegister app. Oops, that's gone wrong. eRegister app as the root, and then I can expand this out. The work we've been doing before Christmas was to set up our domain model. So you can see here are our domain classes, and currently this application doesn't have any controllers. And it doesn't have any views, so that's so it does have. There's a views folder, but there's nothing in it. There are no controllers at the moment. So back in our project root, if previously we'd have done Grails create controller to create a controller, and then we'd have set the view up by hand. But as I said in the slides, that's not a very common way of working. So what we're going to do is we're going to ask Grails to scaffold together controllers and views for one of our domain classes, and what I'm going to go for is instructor. So let's have a quick look at the instructor class. Again, it's got a name, a staff ID, a set of classes, which are the classes taught by this instructor, and we've got our has many annotation here that says actually for that set of classes you need to know that that's really a set of reg class entries, which are the join table between a class and an instructor. And yeah, there we go. Oh, sorry, that's a one-to-many, isn't it? Yeah, one instructor teaches many classes. A class only has one instructor in this limited domain model, and you can see that we've got the mapped by that says on the many side, so in reg class, the property you're going to use to map back is class instructor. So if we look at reg class, there's an instructor property pointing back. So what we're going to do is we'd like to be able to edit instructors. So the fully qualified package name here, that's the package, and then instructor on the end. So let's say Grails generate all, and then we put in the fully qualified class name. Cool. So because this is a fresh checkout from GitHub, Grails will have to compile the project the first time, download anything. Well, it turned out to be quite quick. Now, if I do git status, Git will tell us about all the things in the file system that weren't there before. And we can see that we've now got a new controllers directory, we've got a new instructor subdirectory, and we've got a new unit test. Now actually those are things that would have happened if we'd done a create controller command rather than a generate all. But if you remember, when we did a create controller, what we got was a controller class that was very minimal. I think there were 5 lines in it, and it had an index method which was empty, and we had the views folder created, but we didn't have any content in there. We had to create the index.gsp by hand. Having run that, you can see that we've now got our controllers directory, and it's created the controller with the same package name as the domain class. So here's our instructor class, and here's our instructor controller, which has been generated for us. So if I open this up, you'll see that far from the 5-line controller we got from generate controller, we've got something a little bit more substantial, and we've still got an index method. So the default method, default action for this controller is still index, but all this action does is to redirect us to the list action, which does some work with the database that we'll go into later on. But also we've got create, save, show, edit, and update actions, and delete as well. So it's created quite a lot of code for the particular CRUD, create, retrieve, update, delete operations that we might want to do on this particular domain class. If we look at views, here's the instructor folder, but instead of it being empty, we've got views for create, edit, list, and show with this special underscore form. So if I look at the list view, you'll see a page. So we've not written any of this code, it's all been generated for us. And I'm going to go Grails run app. Okay, and it's come back with eRegister. In fact, why not I just I'll run that. Okay, now you might remember we messed around with the index.gsp page to clear out all the old rubbish, and so what I need to do is, if you remember from the URL pattern in URL mappings.groovy, the URL pattern was controller/action/id. So the URL here is going to be instructor. So let's just go to /instructor. Okay, and you can see that what we've got is it's gone to the index page, which, if you remember, then redirected us to the list page by default. And obviously there's nothing in the database right now. So let's click new instructor. Name, that would be me, staff ID. Okay, and because there's a one-to-many relationship, this has generated a link for us that allows us to add those link entities between an instructor and the courses that he teaches. But if you look at the URL, you'll see it's eRegister reg class, which is pointing to a different domain class. So I'm not going to do that for now, because that points to a link table, and I've not generated the scaffold for that yet, and in actual fact I probably don't want to, because I'm going to want to do something more involved for linking data in those link tables. And this is an area where the scaffold is probably not going to be good enough for us, so I'm not going to do that just yet. I'm just going to leave it as is. Click on create. Okay, and it's taken us back to a show page. So if I click on instructor list again, you can see that here I am. So let's go new instructor. Let's pop Matthew in there, and I'll just make these codes up. We're going to leave the add reg class there, go back to the list, you'll see we've got 2, and if you get to 10 there's pagination on this page and it does all the things that you need to do. Let's just let's add Fred Flintstone as an instructor. Okay, we create. Okay, so back to the instructor. So you can see how we can start to configure reference data, and I'll go into Fred Flintstone. I should be able to I can update it and I can delete it. Okay, so that's an example of how a scaffold works. You would repeat that process for all the other classes that you wanted, and you'll find as you generate scaffolds, they will generate links to other scaffolds that the system thinks should be there, and you have to make a choice about whether you implement those controllers by hand or whether you use scaffolding to put them together. You should note that these scaffolds don't imply any particular look and feel. This is the default groovy look and feel, but I can show you another groovy app. There we go. This is me. So this is another groovy application which is using scaffolds. This page isn't actually a scaffold, however, let's have a quick look. Yeah, that's not a scaffolded page. But this is a page which started out life as a scaffold. So you can see that there is no reason why scaffolded pages need to look quite as dire as this. This is just a default layout, if you like. Some things that we should probably take a quick look at then in the controller. Redirect is implementing a HTTP redirect. When you go to the index page, a message is sent to your browser saying please redirect this request to the list action. So that's what happens when we go to /instructor. The index page is rendered, and all that happens is a request to redirect to instructor/list happens, and that's so that when I go to instructor I end up at instructor/list. So that's a HTTP redirect. When we go to list, we have a max parameter there, which isn't anything, so it's not set by default. And what we're saying is, if we didn't get a max parameter, then set it to default of 10. Okay, just trying to figure out what that's saying actually. Oh, yes. Okay, you can't set it to more than 100. Having done that, this is groovy syntactic sugar. What it's actually saying, by default, Groovy will return the last evaluated statement. So I could type that, and then those. So instructor instance list is passed into our view, as is instructor instance total. This is declaring a map, and so what's happening is, in the interest of terseness, the response is being constructed in one line and returned. It's actually not. Sometimes brevity isn't king. I think it's much more readable to say and certainly I think it makes it easier for you to see what's going on, and actually for me to explain as well, which should tell us something. You can see that I'm using the dot accessor method for the map here, the thing which I said you shouldn't use last screencast. So you can see that this is equivalent to what was there before, but I think this is going to be easier for me to explain. I declare a result map. I then set a variable called instance instructor list to be the result of calling a method called list on the instructor class, and then I declare the instructor instance total variable to be the count of all the instructors. So we're just calling methods on our class here, and then I return that. And if I look, let's just save that. If I look at the list page, so I've got instructor instance list, instructor instance total. and somewhere in here there's going to be an unordered list, I would have thought. Yeah. Sorry, just checking. No, it's not that one. That's the header. Any messages? Here's the list. Oh, it's because I'm looking in show. I should be looking in list. Sorry. Here we go. So let's do that again. So list method, I need to look in list.gsp, and I'm looking for a variable called instructor instance list. Here it is. So I'm saying for each instructor in the instructor instance list, execute this block of HTML. So you can see this is non-standard HTML, and I'm using a special tag to iterate over the things in the list, and for each item in the list I'm going to execute this template, which is going to create a table row, and then you can see it's saying for each entry in the list create a variable called instructor instance that you can use within this block, and then you can see we're creating a link to the show action for the instructor instance, and here's I want to show the name field from instructor instance, and here's where I'm showing the staff ID field as well. So for each instructor in the list we should have a link to a show and then the staff ID field, and name should be shown under the hyperlink. So if I go back here, yep, name and staff ID, and name is a hyperlink. Where you see a tag that begins G:, that's a special groovy tag. It's not HTML. It'll be interpreted, and the interpreted result will be injected into the page. So here we've got an if statement, and here we've got a loop. Bear in mind we shouldn't really have application logic in the page, so it's okay to use things like if to say, oh, is there a message to display, but anything more complicated like the multiplication we did last week we shouldn't have in this page. So a few things to kind of get your head around there. Generate all will generate you this set of pages and a controller for each domain class to give you a very quick editing environment, and they can be arbitrarily complex. I mean, instructor is a simple class, but some of your classes might have 20 or 30 properties, and so you can imagine this is a relatively useful way of generating screens for editing that information for free. You know, you can get your editing environment there with no effort. Be aware of these G: tags. So here we've got a tag called sortable column, so other sorts of things that we got free. If I go back to the instructor list, I can click on the column headings and you'll see they change the sort order. So all these things the framework is just doing for us. We will come a little later on to look at things like SQL injection attacks, and these generated controllers are quite good at protecting you against that sort of thing. So again, another reason why you might want to use a framework is that by default, out of the box, it's protecting you from injection attacks and other kinds of attacks. You should still understand what those attacks involve, but the chances of you being vulnerable to them are greatly reduced because you've got many people looking at the framework code and fixing it. So yeah, a definite advantage to employing these kinds of frameworks. That's all I want to show you here. You need to go away, generate these scaffoldings for some of the primary objects in your domain model, and then we will think about ways that we might be able to link entities together later on. But by all means, have a go at generating link table entities as well, just to see what they look like, but you might find they're not very exciting. Okay, so you need to play with this now and understand it and become comfortable with it, and then bring your questions to class. Okay, thanks.